Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the warm, sandal slap echo of 3rd century Rome, a place where marble colonnades glow under oil lamplight, and the air smells faintly of crushed mint leaves, old stone, and political tension. You're standing near the Forum, late at night. The city's asleep, but you are about to meet a boy emperor with an unusual vendetta, not against rebels or tax evaders or wayward generals, but against pants. Yes, pants. Long-legged, warm, practical pants. The garment you're probably wearing right now. You might think you'd blend in easily in ancient Rome, but one peek at your covered shins, and a toga-clad local would clutch their pearls and mutter something dramatic about barbarian fashion crimes. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive a week without someone demanding you change your outfit. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a gravel road leading toward the Palatine Hill. It's late autumn. The air bites gently at your nose. The guards let you pass after a half-hearted grunt. You're not anyone important, not yet, but your tunic's long enough, your sandals dusty enough, and you nod like someone with errands. That's all it takes to blend in. In the distance, you spot the Imperial Palace, silhouetted against a torchlit sky. Inside, a teenager lounges on a cushioned dais, draped in silks dyed in colors that cost more than a town's yearly tax. His name? Elagabalus. A name that rolls off the tongue like a sneeze, but this boy is emperor, not a general, not a seasoned senator, just a 14-year-old with access to unlimited power and zero supervision. Historians still argue whether he was a misunderstood mystic, a misgendered priest, or a chaos-loving teen armed with divine backup and an infinite wardrobe. Tonight, he's annoyed. His astrologer said he should wear yellow, but he's feeling aquamarine. And someone at breakfast had the audacity to show up in trousers. You weren't there, but it became palace gossip within minutes. A low-ranking administrator, probably cold, probably on his 3rd day of gout, showed up in woolen braque. Pants, comfortable, fitted, barbaric. You can almost hear the room freeze. The emperor apparently stared, blinked once, and then announced, through a mouthful of fig-stuffed pastry, that pants would henceforth be discouraged, strongly. The whisper among servants is that this wasn't his first attempt at clothing lawmaking. Just last week, he'd tried to outlaw dull sandals. No brown, no beige, only sandals that spark joy. But this is different. He's attacking pants, and in Rome, that's not just a fashion faux pas. That's cultural war. The Romans prided themselves on bare legs and breezy tunics. Braque were for northern barbarians, the Gauls, the Germans, the people who ate unseasoned meat and didn't bathe in marble. If you wore trousers, it said you either lived in a tent in the snow or you were plotting something deeply un-Roman. Yet secretly plenty of people wore them. Off-duty soldiers, merchants in the provinces, and cold people. Lots of cold people. You walk past a cluster of market stalls closing up for the night. One vendor tucks away a hidden bolt of soft wool, off the books, allegedly headed for a centurion's wife who's just wearing it indoors. You nod politely and keep walking. The tension is everywhere. Meanwhile, Elagabalus is still pacing. His sandals slap across the marble floor as eunuchs and dancers flutter nearby, waiting for him to calm down. This boy was raised in the East, in Syria, where the climate was warm, the temples were grand, and clothes flowed like water. He wasn't used to Rome's chill mornings. He wrapped himself in long-sleeved robes, glittering gowns, and heavily embroidered fabrics. The Senate hated it. They wanted their emperors stoic, grizzled, and preferably clad in dusty armor. Instead, They got a teenage sun priest who preferred perfumes to parades and took divine guidance from horoscopes. And now he's picking a fight with trousers. You reach the palace wall and pause, watching the guards shift. Inside, Elagabalus reclines once more, finally content. He's sketched out a new imperial edict. It's not quite a full ban, but it's a threat. Pants are now officially labeled barbarous vestments. Not treasonous, but close. Worn only by those who reject Roman virtue or have deeply questionable taste. The scroll is handed off to a scribe. Tomorrow, it will begin its slow, official crawl across the empire. A few soldiers might laugh. Others might burn it. As for the emperor, some may actually. He falls asleep mid-laughter, dreaming of new jewelry designs and even more scandalous reforms. And you? You turn away from the wall and head back down the hill, your breath soft in the night air, the hem of your tunic fluttering just above your ankles, exactly the legal limit. You wake to the sound of temple bells and sandals scuffing stone. The morning sun is still low, catching the domes of Rome in soft gold. It's a fresh day in the eternal city, and the emperor, your emperor, is Elagabalus, age 14, height, unknowable beneath layers of beaded robes. You rub your eyes, wondering how exactly such a figure rose to the throne of the Roman Empire. And as your feet find the cool tile of your rented taberna floor, the memory returns like a whiff of yesterday's garum stew. It was a coup, a family gamble, and a dash of divine PR. Elagabalus didn't win the empire through battle. He didn't deliver a rousing Senate speech or inherit it cleanly from a dying uncle. No, he was catapulted onto the imperial throne by his formidable grandmother, Julia Maesa, a woman who could probably out-negotiate Jupiter himself. Historians still argue whether Maesa orchestrated the whole thing from the start or just saw an opportunity when Caracalla was murdered and his assassin, Macrinus, took over in a wave of unpopularity. Maesa was rich, Syrian, politically sharp, and not especially subtle. She claimed that her grandson, then barely a teenager, was the illegitimate child of Caracalla, divine bloodline secured. It helped that Elagabalus was already a priest of the sun god Elagabal, known for his dramatic rituals and equally dramatic headdresses. People ate it up. Well, not all people, but enough disgruntled troops, missing their bonus pay and not fond of the current emperor, rallied behind this sparkly boy priest with God on his resume. Soon, with the backing of Legio III Gallica and some well-timed bribes, Elagabalus was emperor. You're outside the Senate steps now, watching older men in dusty white togas grumble over the latest scandal. A few still whisper, "He's not Roman enough." They say it every day. But the guards are loyal, the treasury's busy, and frankly, everyone's exhausted. Elagabalus, though, he's thriving. Picture it. The palace transformed into a set for a never-ending religious parade. Statues of the sun god imported from Emesa, new temples built, sacred stones enshrined, priests in shimmering robes pacing sacred corridors while imperial messengers carry scrolls with the latest decree about mandatory incense offerings. You imagine the emperor himself this morning, lounging on a divan beside a bubbling fountain shaped like a dolphin sneezing. He's surrounded by silk-clad attendants, taste-testing honey-dipped pine nuts, while his hair is curled into perfect spirals. Someone nearby coughs, breaking your reverie. You glance sideways. A merchant, mid-30s, cloak fraying, mutters under his breath about the boy queen in the palace. Not too loud, just loud enough to be heard and ignored. Everyone has an opinion, and there are rumors that Elagabalus prefers women's clothing, that he offered fortunes to any physician who could magically change his body, that he married not just once but multiple times, men and women both, and once referred to himself as the Bride of Rome. Historians still debate how much of that was true, how much exaggerated by scandal-hungry senators, and how much was pure theater. You cross into a small garden plaza where peacocks wander freely, and one sleepy artist paints the emperor's likeness on a clay tile. He's not looking at a model. He doesn't need to. Everyone in Rome knows Elagabalus's face by now, youthful, serene, lips faintly smirking, and always surrounded by golden light. The image is on coins, statues, and even wine amphorae labels, propaganda by portraiture. But not everyone is sipping that wine. In the barracks, the older centurions miss the gruff efficiency of Septimius Severus. The bureaucrats wish the emperor would stick to predictable schedules. Even the cooks are quietly overwhelmed by his rotating dietary fads. Last week, it was figs and pine nuts only. This week, it's exclusively foods shaped like stars. And yet, beneath the glitter and theatricality, the empire, somehow, keeps running. You walk past a group of guards on their break. One's laughing over a story. Apparently, the emperor ordered an entire banquet room filled with rose petals. Again. Last time, a guest nearly suffocated trying to find his chair. Your sandals crunch along gravel as you continue through the Campus Martius. It's busy today. Statues of forgotten gods gaze down at you. You wonder if Elagabalus will ever be one of them. Probably not. In the palace, Elagabalus is getting dressed. It's a multi-hour ordeal, not because he's vain, although, yes, but because his attire is a ritual. He sees clothing as a form of worship, each layer a tribute, each accessory a prayer. This morning, he selects a tunic embroidered with tiny golden doves, a belt encrusted with amethysts, and shoes made of dyed ostrich leather. A modest ensemble, really. His advisors once begged him to dress more Roman in public. He agreed, then showed up in a toga made entirely of translucent gauze. You step aside as a cart rolls past, laden with bolts of imported silk and rare perfumes from Arabia. The court's demand for luxury is insatiable. Traders are thrilled. Stoic philosophers, less so. You overhear a student quoting Seneca, "Luxury is not happiness. It is a gilded trap." His teacher nods solemnly, then adjusts his own fur-lined cloak. But Elagabalus doesn't see contradiction. He sees harmony. If the gods love beauty, why not live beautifully? It's a good argument, especially when paired with generous temple feasts and surprise coin giveaways. The people aren't thrilled, but they're fed. The treasury is bleeding, but the fountains still run. And somewhere in the heart of the city, a small tailor grimaces as he's handed a new order. 5 tunics, sleeveless, with matching veils. Delivery by moonrise. The sun is at its peak now. The emperor and the streets shimmer with heat. You duck into the shade of an archway, where the stone is still cool from the night. A cluster of off-duty soldiers lingers nearby, boots scuffed, helmets resting in the crooks of their arms. One of them is rolling his eyes as he describes the latest imperial missive, a list of acceptable tunic colors for public serenity. Not military efficiency, not diplomatic clarity. Serenity. Apparently bright oranges are out. Blues are in, but only if they match the sky at dusk. Someone joked that purple is always acceptable, but only if you're trying to get assassinated. You move on. In the palace, Elagabalus has just finished another audience, this one with a delegation from the northern provinces. They're polite, nervous, wearing thick wool trousers beneath their ceremonial tunics. The emperor notices, of course. He always notices. He raises an eyebrow, just slightly. "You must be very cold in your homeland," he says in fluent Greek, his tone like honey mixed with vinegar. "So cold that you've wrapped your legs in shame." The room doesn't laugh. No one breathes. The men bow quickly and pretend not to understand. Elagabalus waves them off, more bored than angry. They are dismissed with fruit baskets and veiled warnings about dress codes in the capital. You reach a market where a seller is unrolling scrolls of band attire. There's a whispered market for clothing now, tucked in alleys and back rooms. Robes that fall too long, pants that hug the shin, cloaks too Eastern in cut. Rome, it seems, is dressing rebelliously. A young woman picks through the forbidden pile, holding up a pair of soft leather trousers. Only for winter, she murmurs to herself. It's not just about warmth anymore. It's a quiet rebellion, a softness against decree. The emperor might have banned pants, but he's made them interesting. And in Rome, nothing spreads faster than curiosity. Inside the palace, the emperor prepares for his afternoon meditation, not a quiet chant or a nap, but a performance. Robes are changed, incense lit, cymbals chimed. He sits in a high-backed chair shaped like a sunburst, eyes closed, arms outstretched. He's communing, allegedly, with his god, or perhaps just planning the next feast. Sometimes he speaks mid-trance. Last week he proclaimed that Rome's diet should include more lilies. The kitchen staff are still figuring that one out. Historians still argue whether Elagabalus truly believed himself a living conduit for divine will, or if it was theater to distract, to dazzle, to survive. But there's one thing nobody questions. He had taste. Chaotic, yes, but exquisite. You pass a young boy trying on a decorative circlet in front of a mirror shard. He mimics the emperor's walk, slow, deliberate, like each step paints a blessing on the earth. His older sister laughs, then hushes him before a stern-faced neighbor glares. Elagabalus has made an impression. Even among those who scoff, his presence is felt. In the perfume sellers hawking exotic oils, in the murals showing gods with radiant halos, in the courtiers nervously adjusting their robes every time a messenger enters. You wander near the theater of Marcellus, where actors prepare for tonight's pantomime. The script has changed again, now featuring a veiled reference to a mighty sun god who despises woolen legs. Everyone knows who it means. Everyone laughs anyway. The emperor encourages this sort of play, so long as it flatters. Satire, as long as it sparkles. Back at the palace, a new design has arrived. A silken robe patterned with tiny constellations. The emperor claps his hands in delight. The stars align, literally, across his shoulders. Perfect for tomorrow's appearance at the temple, he purrs. His advisors exchange glances. No one's sure what tomorrow's appearance is about. Probably something ritualistic. Possibly something invented an hour ago. One thing's certain, it will be memorable. You pause by a fountain where two elderly women are whispering over figs. One mentions how her nephew was nearly fined for wearing brachy while delivering olives near the forum. He's got cold knees, she says. That's a crime now? They both giggle, and one plucks a leaf from her hair. Soon they'll tell us which foot to start walking with. They're joking, but you wouldn't put it past him. The city is adapting, though. Rome always does. Even emperors come and go, especially the dramatic ones. But while they're here, they leave footprints in the marble. Elagabalus's are glittery. You make your way back through the Subura district, a tangle of apartment buildings and noisy taverns. Laundry flaps above, some of it suspiciously pants-like. Fashion is having a moment. Clandestine tailors, whispered fittings, a new trend of leg drapes that totally aren't. Along a quieter road, a messenger rides out, scroll in hand, destination, the provinces. It's another clothing edict, or maybe an invitation to a midwinter festival themed entirely around the sun and ostriches. Hard to say. The day eases into its warm golden slump, and the streets of Rome hum with that lazy rhythm familiar to any ancient city that has eaten well and drunk too much wine by noon. You stroll past a vine-draped colonnade, watching a stray dog chase pigeons, and you can't help but wonder, what does an emperor do in the afternoon? Well, if you're Elagabalus, you host a council meeting in a room filled with lavender-scented smoke, recline on cushions, and interrupt the senators to compliment their tunics, provided they aren't wearing trousers, of course. The council itself is a theater of discomfort. The senators try to maintain their usual stiff backs and stiff opinions, but they're seated in a semicircle of plush embroidered divans. There's harp music in the background, A peacock struts through, unimpressed. Elagabalus greets them wearing a robe made entirely of interwoven gold threads. It weighs nearly as much as a marble bust, but glimmers like something from a dream. He lifts one finger, and the room quiets. "Let us discuss decorum," he says softly. One senator shifts in his seat, trying to hide the fact that he is, indeed, wearing pants under his ceremonial toga. A terrible gamble. The emperor's gaze lingers just long enough to curdle wine. You can't help but admire the control. Elagabalus doesn't wield the sword. He wields the stare, the stagecraft. His rules are strange, yes, but they are enforced not by decree alone, but by ritual humiliation, by fashion shaming, by subtle theater. He doesn't need to outlaw pants with spears. He does it with pointed compliments and invitations to wear something more befitting the divine air of Rome. Historians still argue whether his campaign against trousers was purely cultural, an attempt to purify Rome of foreign influences, or if it was a deeply personal act, a rejection of masculinity as defined by Rome, an assertion of power by redrawing the lines of what it meant to be imperial. You're now walking through one of Rome's many bathhouses. A marvel, really. Steam rising, laughter echoing, mosaics glittering on every curved surface. But even here, fashion peeks in. In the changing area, some patrons whisper that attendants are reporting unauthorized leg garments. There's a story of one man who was politely escorted out for wearing the attire of a Gallic merchant. He was from Sicily. You shake your head. Elagabalus's vision of Rome is a place of sun-drenched robes, flowing silks, and glistening shoulders, not the cold austerity of military uniform or the stiff dignity of senatorial blacks. His world is fluid, fragrant, and a little ridiculous. Later that day, he inspects his latest temple renovation. You follow at a respectful distance, standing with the crowd that has gathered to glimpse their emperor. He descends from his palanquin like a god stepping down from Olympus. Today he wears pale blue, with sleeves that trail like ribbons in the breeze. At his side is a priest of the Elagabal cult, carrying a sacred stone wrapped in embroidered cloth. The sun shines directly onto the stone, and the crowd gasps. It's been positioned just so for maximum effect. A calculated miracle. The emperor raises his arms. "The gods love beauty," he says. "Why should we deny them?" No one's sure what that means, but they cheer anyway. And then, without warning, he gestures toward a Roman general standing stiffly in the front row. The man is a war hero, covered in medals, legs very much encased in regulation military pants. "Commander," Elagabalus calls, "do the gods love your trousers?" It's not a question, it's a spotlight. The commander's face freezes in a mask of public composure and private horror. He mutters something about practicality and field conditions, but the emperor waves it off. "Let us speak again when your knees are free." The crowd laughs uneasily. You imagine the commander going home, sitting in his villa and glaring at his wardrobe like it betrayed him. Maybe tomorrow he'll wear a tunic. Maybe not. Either way, Elagabalus has made his point. You veer off toward the imperial gardens, where even the peacocks seem faintly overdressed. It's quieter here. You hear harp music drifting from the palace windows, along with the faint sound of the flutes? Definitely flutes. Inside, the emperor is planning a new feast. This one, he's decided, will be themed around rebirth. Guests are to arrive in egg-colored clothing, and the tables will be arranged in the shape of a chrysalis. No pants, obviously. Pants are not transformative. Pants are containment. The court scribes dutifully record the theme and begin drawing up invitations shaped like butterflies. Meanwhile, the palace staff begin hunting for egg-shaped cheeses and caterpillars that look elegant when cooked. You lean against a marble pillar and wonder if this is what madness looks like, or if it's just a different kind of genius. It's easy to laugh at Elagabalus, but harder to deny that he's changing Rome in strange and permanent ways. The emperor isn't just banning pants, he's questioning the entire uniform of Roman masculinity. The idea that to rule means to be hard, martial, armored. His reign says otherwise. He rules with color, fragrance, and audacity. And somehow he's still alive, at least for now. Evening settles over Rome like spilled wine, deep purple shadows, gold streaks glinting off marble statues, and a hush that's almost reverent, if not for the ever-present hum of gossip. You wind your way toward the Aventine Hill, where the night air carries whispers from open balconies and lamplight dances across polished sandals. Inside the imperial palace, Elagabalus is selecting earrings. Not just any earrings. These ones feature tiny golden suns encircling sapphires, dangling just enough to catch the candlelight. A servant adjusts his headdress while another sprinkles rose water across the floor. You can almost taste the perfume in the air, sweet, heady, unmistakably imperial. Tonight isn't just a feast, it's a statement. The emperor's theme, Divine Dusk, which naturally requires attendees to wear only colors seen during a Roman sunset. Trousers, being too earthbound, are explicitly forbidden. The invitation read, "Let your garments float like the breath of Apollo." Practical, number poetic, entirely. As you pass beneath a carved arch, you catch sight of the courtyard, torches blazing, silver platters hovering through clusters of robed aristocrats, and a harpist perched on a stone pedestal, plucking dreamy chords as if hypnotizing the moon itself. You find a spot near the entryway, trying not to draw attention. The emperor emerges from a golden arch, walking slowly, as if the weight of divinity is carefully balanced on his shoulders. His robe is translucent ivory, with threads of gold that shimmer like dragonfly wings. He does not walk, he glides. A murmur moves through the crowd, not of shock, but of admiration, maybe even envy. He's a spectacle, yes, but one you can't look away from. The senators bow. Their robes comply with the theme, their expressions less so. You spot one man standing stiffly, sweat collecting at his temple. He's wearing a makeshift kilt, clearly a repurposed tunic, a creative attempt to obey the emperor's anti-pants rule without exposing too much leg. It's a fashion compromise worthy of Cicero's rhetorical gymnastics. Elagabalus notices. He always notices, but instead of reprimand, he offers the man a toast. To innovation, he purrs, raising a goblet filled with something that smells suspiciously like fermented dates and rosemary. The senator exhales in relief. Nearby, someone whispers, "That's worth at least 3 votes in the next budget meeting." You slip through the crowd toward the musicians, who now accompany a pair of dancers wearing sheer veils and tiny gold bells. They spin with practiced grace, never quite touching, never quite stopping. And here, surrounded by decadence and performance, you realize something. This emperor, for all his absurdity, understands spectacle better than most generals understand war. His dinner parties aren't just indulgent, they're policy. If he bans pants, it's not because he cares about your calves. It's because he knows clothing is power. Who wears what, when, and why. That's how you mold an empire without lifting a sword. Historians still argue whether Elagabalus's fashion edicts were merely frivolous or subtly political. But you're starting to see how they were both. If Rome is a stage, then the emperor is writing the script and designing the costumes. At the center of the courtyard, a servant unveils a dessert shaped like a phoenix. Real fire erupts from its wings. The crowd gasps, applauds, and reaches for their goblets again. Beneath the laughter, someone mutters, "He's mad." Someone else says, "He's clever." And someone, slightly tipsy, says, "Honestly, pants are overrated." Later, as the moon rises and the guests spill out into the quiet alleys of Rome, You trail behind a trio of philosophers debating whether trousers promote barbarism or just chilly thighs. One insists that Roman identity is rooted in the tunic, the freedom of movement, the dignity of exposed limbs. Another suggests the emperor might just be really into ankles. The third quotes a Greek poet: "Style is the soul's handwriting." You chuckle to yourself. As you turn toward that your one rented probably insula, the night air brushes against your shins. No trousers. Not tonight. It's not worth the risk or the fashion shame. You pass a group of young men huddled beneath a torch, sketching new robe designs onto a piece of discarded parchment. One has drawn a long tunic with side slits, airy, elegant, and technically compliant. Another is sketching leggings disguised as ceremonial wrappings. Underground fashion is flourishing. Rome has always been about pushing rules just far enough to make new ones. In that way, Elagabalus might be the most Roman of all. He doesn't just rule by decree, he rules by mood, by whim, by fabric. You pause outside a fabric stall being packed up for the night. Bolts of shimmering silk, gauzy linens, and some suspiciously pant-shaped items are being loaded into a cart. The vendor catches your eye and smirks. "Don't tell the emperor," he says. You raise a finger to your lips. Your secret's safe. Back at the palace, Elagabalus retires to his private chambers. Or so the servants say. In truth, he stays awake long after the candles dim, dreaming up new costumes for the morning audience. Tomorrow might be Seafoam Green Day, or Barefoot Wednesday. Maybe even a brief reversal, mandatory pants for senators, just to see them squirm. Power, after all, is best enjoyed with a sense of humor. The next morning greets you not with the clamor of marching legions or the disciplined shuffle of Roman bureaucracy, but with the sound of laughter echoing through the palace gardens. A gentle breeze rustles the olive trees, and you catch snippets of music as you make your way down the gravel path. Today is no ordinary day. It's Festival of the Soft Things, a new invention by Elagabalus that celebrates, according to the handwritten scroll nailed to a lopsided column, the gentler textures of empire. Silks, petals, custards, and of course, robe-friendly weather. Pants are not merely discouraged, they're unthinkable. You pass by a group of courtiers lounging in an artificial meadow scattered with imported flowers. One of them is feeding grapes to a small goat wearing a jeweled collar. Another strums a lyre badly while trying to recite poetry about the beauty of elbow dimples. It's that kind of morning. In the midst of it all, Elagabalus appears, reclining beneath a tent of transparent purple gauze, surrounded by cushions and a soft chorus of flutes. His hair is braided with pearls, his robe so sheer it seems stitched from moonlight. He is not here to govern. He is here to inspire. Rome has spent centuries glorifying the sword, he says casually to a group of senators kneeling on rugs shaped like lilies. But the pillow? The pillow endures. It's not clear if this is philosophy or sleep deprivation, but the senators nod dutifully, robes slightly askew from sitting cross-legged for too long. You settle near the garden's edge, where young servants are demonstrating how to fold tunics into pleasure piles, a storage method Elagabalus claims enhances aroma and reduces wrinkles. One of them whispers, he got the idea from watching doves nest. Historians still argue whether this entire phase of his reign was a calculated rejection of Roman militarism or just an extended spa day. Some records suggest he consulted with Eastern mystics on the importance of tactile comfort in governance. Others hint at sheer boredom. Either way, you're pretty sure no one in history has spent this much time thinking about robe softness. Around midday, a procession of priests arrives, bearing a long stretch of fabric they claim was woven by Temple Virgin under moonlight. It's impossibly soft and emits a faint scent of honey and jasmine. Elagabalus rises, slowly, regally, and drapes it around himself like a second skin. Now this, he says with a contented sigh, is what true power feels like. The crowd applauds, some of them genuinely, others out of habit or fear. A few senators share a glance that says, "At least it's not another fish-themed feast." You decide to wander away from the softness summit and find yourself in the imperial wardrobe, a vaulted chamber filled with endless bolts of fabric, crates of jewelry, and racks upon racks of garments organized by color, mood, and moon phase. One servant tells you, with a completely straight face, that Tuesdays are for blue-tone melancholy, and that tunics worn on Thursdays must have at least one joyful accent. Socks, which are thankfully still permitted, are organized by texture, from crisp linen to suggestive velvet. In the back corner, you spot a pile of confiscated trousers. Some are clearly military issue. Others look foreign, Parthian, Germanic, even a few embroidered Persian breeches. All banned, folded in a heap like defeated relics touch one of a thick woolen pair from the northern provinces, and instantly understand why Elagabalus detests them. They itch, they clench, they restrict. You wouldn't want to wear these while nibbling candied lotus or composing a poem about the moon's mood swings either. Later, the emperor holds court again, this time seated on a platform shaped like a seashell. There's a new decree. All senators are hereby invited to submit robe designs reflective of their home province's flora. Someone asks if this includes Gaul, whose primary flora seems to be mud. Yes, Elagabalus replies. Even mud may inspire art. A murmur of resignation ripples through the group. Tomorrow, Rome may look like a botanical garden threw up on a toga party. And yet, beneath the absurdity, there's a method here. The emperor's sartorial demands force unity through compliance, not by brute force, but by social performance. If you want influence, you dress the part, literally. He's turned fashion into foreign policy. One ambassador from the East even remarks, "It is refreshing in a way." At least he is predictable about his unpredictability. That night, you pass by a statue of Mars, god of war, now draped in a silk scarf and adorned with rose petals. Someone, probably the emperor himself, has painted the words, "War is out, whimsy is in," on the pedestal in crushed berries. You can't help but laugh, and then you pause. Because maybe, just maybe, Elagabalus isn't simply banning pants to be ridiculous. Maybe he's building a new Rome, a softer, stranger, more theatrical Rome. One where the weapons are robes, the armor is perfume, and the battlefield is a silk-strewn banquet. Dawn's pale light filters through your window as you step into the buzzing Roman street. The usual morning clamor is muted, as if the city itself is still adjusting to Elagabalus's new rhythms. It's a city caught between expectation and whimsy, the kind of place where senators debate the merits of rose-scented tunics while merchants haggle over embroidered slippers. Today brings news that sets tongues wagging more than any feast or festival. The emperor, it seems, has officially banned trousers from the Senate floor. Not just a suggestion, but an imperial edict. Anyone daring to wear pants to official business risks public reprimand and the loss of their seat. You pause to watch a group of senators approach the Senate House. Their faces are a patchwork of resignation, amusement, and sheer disbelief. One, an elderly man with a beard like a tangled olive branch, is wearing a tunic so long it threatens to trip him. Another tries to camouflage pants beneath an overgenerous toga, but the outline betrays him. Inside, the Senate chamber looks like a fabric shop exploded. Robes in every imaginable color ripple beneath high ceilings as senators shuffle uncomfortably on stone benches. Elagabalus sits high on his throne, a vision in lavender and gold, the golden sun of Emesa embroidered across his chest. He taps a jeweled ring against the armrest and says, "Let decorum shine brighter than steel." The session begins, but the focus isn't on policy. Instead, senators awkwardly debate the practicality of their new wardrobes. One proposes that the abandonment of trousers fosters unity. Another argues it impedes mobility and risks dignity. Historians still argue whether the ban was an elaborate political maneuver or simply Elagabalus's eccentric desire to remake Roman identity. Meanwhile, outside, a group of merchants has caught on to the fashion wave. They sell anti-pants kits, flowy tunics, silk wraps, and slippers embroidered with imperial seals. Business is booming. You wander toward a small bakery where a new delicacy has emerged, the tunic tart, a flaky pastry rumored to be inspired by the emperor's favorite robe patterns. A baker offers you a taste, winking as he says, perfect for those who want a bit of fabric in their diet. You chuckle and take a bite, the sweetness melting in your mouth as a flute player serenades the street corner. Back in the palace, Elagabalus hosts a private audience with his close advisors. The conversation drifts toward the future, whether the empire will accept this sartorial revolution or recoil. One advisor warns of rebellion brewing in the provinces, where traditionalists chafe at the petticoat politics of the capital. Elagabalus smiles. Change is never comfortable, he muses. But Rome is a chameleon. It adapts. Later that evening, a troupe of performers presents a pantomime depicting a heroic senator abandoning his pants to embrace freedom. The crowd laughs, cheers, and some even shed their own trousers in solidarity. You lean against a marble column, watching the spectacle, feeling the strange energy of a city on the streets fill with whispered stories, some mocking, some admiring, of an emperor who dared to unravel the threads of tradition and stitch a new tapestry. You pull your robe tighter, feeling the soft fabric brush against your skin. The world outside may still cling to old customs, but here, in the heart of Rome, a new story is unfolding. And it's one woven not with swords or laws, but with silk and audacity. The morning air carries a curious mix of anticipation and quiet rebellion. You step into the marketplace, where the scent of fresh figs mingles with the sharp tang of fermented garum. Vendors shout over one another, hawking fabrics dyed in every conceivable hue, from deep indigo to the palest rose. The fashion revolution has gone viral, and even the most stubborn cobblers now offer slippers embroidered with miniature suns, the emblem of Elagabalus's cult. A group of youths gathers near a fountain, animatedly debating the latest imperial decree that all public servants must wear only garments dyed with natural colors from the empire's provinces. Synthetic or imported dyes are officially banned. This, the emperor claims, honors Rome's vast diversity and ensures loyalty through chromatic solidarity. You watch as one teenager waves a small pouch filled with crushed woad, the blue pigment of Gaul, boasting that his tunic will outshine the senator's lavender robe. Around you, whispers suggest this colorful policy is another way Elagabalus extends his influence, not through conquest, but through color. In the nearby baths, gossip swirls alongside steam. Patrons speculate on the emperor's latest obsession, hosting silk sleep salons, where courtiers and citizens alike are invited to recline on cushions and listen to poets recite verses about softness, dreams, and fabric textures. Some say it's a form of escapism, others, a cunning political tool to lull the populace into compliance. Historians still debate whether these salons were sincere attempts at cultural innovation or elaborate distractions from mounting political unrest. Either way, you imagine the emperor reclining in one such salon, silk robes draped luxuriously, a sly smile playing on his lips. You move toward the forum, where an unusual spectacle unfolds. A troupe of performers reenacts the mythical story of the god Apollo bestowing tunics upon mortals, highlighting the divine origins of clothing and, implicitly, the emperor's own sartorial mandates. The crowd is entranced, caught between amusement and reverence. Nearby, a vendor hawks miniature statues of Elagabalus, each one depicting him in extravagant robes and, notably, without pants. It's a quirky souvenir, but also a symbol of a reign marked by whimsy and defiance. As you wander through the city, you reflect on the power of clothing in this peculiar chapter of Roman history. More than just fabric and thread, these garments are statements about identity, authority, and the ever-shifting boundaries of tradition. And as night descends, you find yourself humming a lullaby the poets recited, a gentle melody weaving softness into the fabric of Rome's restless heart. You awake to the distant crowing of roosters and the soft murmur of the Tiber flowing lazily beneath stone bridges. Today, the city hums with a peculiar energy, as if caught between the residue of night's dreams and the sharp edges of a waking reality. The imperial palace, as always, feels like a world apart, its marble halls cool beneath your fingertips as you walk through corridors lined with golden lamps and silk draperies. News has arrived. The emperor is set to host a grand feast celebrating the eternal elegance of robes. Invitations were delivered by pigeons adorned with tiny ribbons, a detail that speaks volumes about the theatricality of this reign. You accept your own invite with a mixture of curiosity and a sense of impending spectacle. The banquet hall is a riot of colors and textures. Long tables groan under the weight of dishes that look as much like art as food. Roasted peacock glazed with honey, figs stuffed with spiced almonds, and a curious sweet made from pomegranate seeds and rosewater. Servers move gracefully, balancing platters piled high with exotic fruits and silken pastries. Elagabalus, ever the showman, arrives wearing a robe that seems to shimmer with an inner light. His smile is enigmatic as he raises a goblet of wine infused with saffron, the golden hue catching the flickering candlelight. To soft things and softer hearts, he toasts. The crowd echoes with gentle applause. Throughout the evening, conversations drift between light-hearted banter and earnest debates on the nature of power and tradition. Some senators quietly question whether this fixation on robes and textures might be a mask for deeper uncertainties. Others revel in the change, seeing a chance to break free from the rigidity of old customs. Was a sincere celebration or a strategic distraction from mounting tensions in the provinces. The answer, as always, remains elusive. Between courses, entertainers perform pantomimes and dances, their movements fluid and hypnotic, weaving stories of gods and mortals, love and transformation. You catch a glimpse of a poet reciting verses praising the emperor's vision of a Rome reborn, not through conquest, but through comfort and beauty. As the night deepens, the conversation turns to more personal topics. You overhear a noblewoman confessing that she has secretly embraced the new dress code, finding unexpected freedom in the soft folds of her tunics. A senator admits he misses the practicality of his old trousers, but concedes that the change has softened his outlook in ways he hadn't anticipated. Later, as the guests begin to depart, you step outside into the cool night air. The city is quiet, the stars twinkling above like scattered jewels on a velvet cloak. You pause, feeling the gentle rustle of your robe around your legs, and wonder how history will remember this curious emperor who dared to remake an empire, one garment at a time. Section 10. The morning sun spills its golden light across the forum, illuminating statues and pillars that have witnessed centuries of triumphs, debates, and daily life in Rome. Today, however, the usual grandeur feels softened, as if the city itself has been draped in a silk veil reflecting the emperor's influence. You wander toward the imperial stables, where a curious spectacle unfolds. Elagabalus, never one to shy away from the theatrical, has declared that all horses must be dressed in ceremonial coverings during the next procession. These coverings are no ordinary horse blankets, but elaborately embroidered silks designed to echo the emperor's love of texture and color. As you approach, you notice the horses, surprisingly calm, their glossy coats partially hidden beneath shimmering fabrics embroidered with suns, moons, and stars. A stable hand explains that this is meant to honor Sol Invictus, the sun god Elagabalus worships devoutly. Historians still debate whether these equestrian costumes were sincere religious offerings, or another chapter in the emperor's ongoing performance art. You watch as the emperor arrives, dressed in a robe that seems to catch and refract the morning light. He runs a hand affectionately along the neck of a white horse, murmuring something about the royal softness of its mane. Nearby, a group of senators watch with mixed expressions, some amused, others bewildered, and a few quietly fuming about what they see as frivolity amidst serious governance. Later, you find yourself wandering the city's quieter streets where artisans craft the emperor's favored robes and accessories. You stop by a workshop where an elderly tailor meticulously embroiders a new garment with tiny golden suns. He tells you that working for the emperor is both a blessing and a burden. Every stitch carries weight, he says, for it is not just fabric, but the fate of Rome woven into every thread. You muse on this as you stroll toward the Tiber River, where children play in the shallow waters, their laughter mingling with the gentle lapping of waves against stone. Among them, you spot a small boy, wearing a tunic patterned with suns and stars, clearly inspired by imperial fashion even at his tender age. As afternoon turns to dusk, you attend a philosophical discussion hosted by a group of scholars who debate the nature of tradition and innovation. The conversation is lively but polite, with participants considering whether Elagabalus's sartorial reforms are a new kind of diplomacy, a softer, more symbolic way to unify the empire, or simply a fleeting eccentricity. You leave the gathering with a sense of the empire caught in a delicate balance between change and continuity. Night falls, and the city quiets once more. You pause on a balcony overlooking the softly lit streets, feeling the cool breeze against your skin and the gentle weight of your robe. The emperor's vision is still unfolding. Thread by thread, in this sprawling baked bread and herbs fills the air as you walk through a bustling neighborhood near the Aventine Hill. The streets are alive with vendors selling everything from fragrant spices to woven sandals, their voices rising in a gentle cacophony. Here, far from the marble palaces and grand forums, you sense the pulse of everyday Roman life, quietly adapting to the subtle shifts imposed from above. Today, the latest imperial decree has reached these corners. All public servants, including market inspectors and scribes, must now don robes embroidered with symbols representing their profession. A tailor shows you a delicate design of quills and scrolls stitched onto a soft linen robe, intended for scribes like himself. The intention, the emperor claims, is to celebrate individual contribution to the empire while maintaining the overarching theme of soft elegance. Some locals find it charming, a bit theatrical but harmless. Others grumble that the practicalities of work are better suited to simple tunics and comfortable trousers. Historians still debate whether this move was a genuine attempt to cultivate pride among the lower ranks or a way for Elagabalus to extend his aesthetic vision into every corner of society. You watch a market inspector carefully examine the quality of olives, his robe swaying gently with each movement, a vivid tapestry of grapes and branches sewn along its hem. Despite the impracticality, he wears it with a quiet dignity that suggests acceptance, perhaps even pride, in the new order. Nearby, a group of children chase one another, their laughter ringing through the open square. One small girl is dressed in a tunic patterned with tiny loaves of bread, her eyes sparkling with delight. You wonder if, years from now, these playful uniforms will be remembered as a curious footnote or a meaningful symbol of a city in transition. You stop at a small tavern for a moment's respite, the warmth of its wooden beams and the aroma of spiced wine offering comfort. The tavern keeper, a stout woman with a knowing smile, shares stories of patrons who have embraced the robe edicts in surprising ways. One senator who wears a garment covered in embroidered fish, a nod to his family's humble fishing origins. You chuckle at the idea of such sartorial storytelling, realizing how clothing has become a silent language in Rome, speaking volumes without a single word. As the afternoon light softens, You step outside and notice a troupe of street performers weaving through the crowd. They act out scenes of senators debating robe colors and horse coverings, their exaggerated gestures drawing laughter and applause. You can't help but smile, caught up in the gentle absurdity of it all. As evening approaches, you reflect on the growing fusion of tradition and whimsy. Rome's ancient stones may bear witness to countless emperors and wars, but today they are wrapped in a softer, more colorful cloak, a reminder that even the mightiest empires are woven from threads, both strong with a delicate and quiet. The air heavy with the scent of blooming oleander, and the distant murmur of water from the Aqua Claudia aqueduct. You wander toward the outskirts of the city, where the elite have begun to build lavish villas that mirror the emperor's love for flowing fabrics and soft textures. Among these estates, a new trend emerges. Gardens planted not only for beauty, but to provide materials for dyes and textiles. Lavender for purple, madder root for reds, and indigo for blues. The owners believe that wearing clothes dyed with their own garden's harvest connects them more deeply to the land and the emperor's vision. You stroll through one such garden, the air thick with the hum of bees and the soft rustle of silk banners hanging from pergolas. A gardener tends to rows of woad and weld, plants historically used in Roman textiles, but now cherished as symbols of a softer, more natural way of life. Historians still debate whether these horticultural experiments were genuine attempts to support local economies or mere fashionable whims encouraged by courtly influence. Nearby, a philosopher sits beneath a fig tree, scribbling notes on the nature of color and identity. He posits that the emperor's decrees encourage a blending of personal expression with imperial unity, a paradox that reflects Rome's eternal dance between individuality and conformity. As you walk further, you come upon a small workshop where artisans craft intricate silk fans, their delicate ribs carved from ivory and bone. These fans are not merely ornamental, but serve as cooling tools during Rome's hot summers, a practical luxury favored by the emperor himself. A young woman offers you a demonstration, her fingers fluttering the fan with such grace that it seems to create a whispering breeze, carrying soft, floral scents through the air. You can't help but marvel at the way everyday objects have taken on new significance under this emperor's rule. Even something as simple as a fan becomes a symbol of comfort, refinement, and subtle power. Later, in a quiet corner of the city, a group of scholars debates the impact of Elagabalus's fashion reforms on Rome's social fabric. Some argue that these changes reflect a broader shift toward valuing comfort and personal expression. Others caution that the emperor's eccentricities might alienate traditionalists and stir unrest. You listen, fascinated by the range of opinions, and wonder how history will judge this chapter, whether as a brief, whimsical interlude or a meaningful transformation. As dusk falls, you return to the city's heart, the soft glow of lanterns casting gentle shadows on ancient stones. The world feels both familiar and new, wrapped in the folds of silk and sunlight. A city morning finds you near the edge of the Palatine Hill, where the imperial kitchens stretch like a miniature city, brick ovens puffing out curls of steam, clay pots bubbling with stew, servants rushing about with armfuls of herbs and amphorae. But today, the kitchen's usual bustle has taken a peculiar turn. Word has spread that Elagabalus has declared a new dining mandate. All imperial meals are now to be served on textiles instead of plates. Soft cloths of linen and silk, each meal arranged like an edible tapestry. You blink, but yes, the news is real. A chef, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but pride twinkling beneath, lets you peek inside. There, a roasted duck rests on a bed of lavender-dyed fabric, its skin glistening with honey and dates. Next to it, pickled vegetables have been arranged into swirling patterns, embroidered, well, almost with sauces. It's a little like painting, the chef sighs. Except the canvas stains, and complains. You chuckle, but it's clear that the emperor's influence has reached even the most practical corners of palace life. He is weaving softness not only into clothing, but into habits, rituals, and even dinner itself. You dine later that day as a guest of a wealthy merchant who has adopted the imperial method. He lays out a picnic on the softest of imported Egyptian cotton, each dish resting like precious art. You find yourself carefully peeling dates from their embroidered background, unsure where the food ends and the presentation begins. Historians still argue whether Elagabalus's culinary reforms were meant to elevate dining to a sensorial art, or if he simply got tired of silverware clinking too loudly. Elsewhere, you hear of an elderly senator who has stubbornly resisted the soft plate trend and now eats exclusively from a stone bowl just to remember how food is meant to taste. But among the younger elite, the trend catches on quickly. Dinners become performances. Guests compare table fabrics, not just flavors. Conversation turns to the absorbency of linen or whether mulberry silk leaves a better impression, literally. You begin to realize something deeper is happening. Softness is no longer just a texture. It's becoming a symbol, a rebellion of comfort, a challenge to centuries of bronze and marble. Even in the streets, you pass vendors selling picnic cloaks, shawls designed to be worn during the day and unwrapped for dining at dusk. One enthusiastic customer describes them as a toga that feeds you. At a bathhouse later that evening, the conversation drifts, as it often does, from politics to absurdities. Someone jokes that if Elagabalus ruled long enough, citizens might end up sleeping on platters and eating from pillows. You smile at the image, reclining in the warm water, steam rising gently around you like a silk curtain. The very air feels softer now. Beneath the candlelight flickering on the tiled walls, someone murmurs, "We laugh, but maybe softness is what Rome needed all along." A soft drizzle and you can't help cobblestones as you make your way through the Subura, Rome's densely packed neighborhood of taverns, bathhouses, and rumor. Today, the whispers are as textured as velvet and just as strange. The emperor, it's said, has made a new decree, not banning anything this time, but adding a required scent protocol to the senatorial dress code. Yes, scent. Henceforth, any senator entering the curia must be lightly perfumed, preferably with jasmine, frankincense, or the emperor's personal favorite, a blend of myrrh, cedar, and pressed rose petals. The intention? To ensure Rome's leadership not only looks but smells pleasing to the gods and people alike. You arrive just in time to see a row of senators in their finery, hesitating at the entrance as attendants dab perfumed oils onto their robes. One man grimaces, another rolls his eyes. A third lifts his wrist, sniffs, and shrugs. Could be worse. At least it's not fish sauce. You can't help but grin. Inside the Senate, the usual murmur of political maneuvering is now accompanied by a fog of floral notes. Some senators pretend it isn't happening. Others fan themselves dramatically, their gestures a bit too grand, clearly mocking the new protocol under the guise of participating. Historians still debate whether this decree was symbolic, a kind of olfactory branding for a softer Rome, or simply one of Elagabalus's endless whims, indulged and enforced for the sake of novelty. Back outside, apothecaries scramble to meet demand. Scent blending becomes an art form overnight. You visit one tucked under a faded awning, where shelves overflow with tiny clay vials and fragrant scrolls outlining aromatic strategies for political influence. You spot blends with names like Civic Laurel and Ambrosial Compromise. The apothecary lets you sample one. It smells like pine, ambition, and just a touch of regret. Later that day, the scent trend spreads beyond the curia. A baker dusts his bread with cinnamon and rosewater. A magistrate appears at a trial with lemon-scented parchment. A gladiator sponsor arrives at the arena drenched in something that smells suspiciously like lilac and old money. Even among the poorer districts, street vendors begin selling handmade scent stones, small pebbles dipped in fragrant oil, carried in pockets or slung on strings. Children play games trading them. One boy insists his stone smells like the emperor's hallway. That night, as you walk through the city's quieter lanes, the aroma of the day clings gently to the air. The combined scent of jasmine, spices, fresh-baked bread, and the ever-present scent of Roman rain makes the city feel oddly peaceful, softer, stranger. You pause near a statue of Jupiter, garlanded with flowers, and now it seems spritzed with perfume. The wind carries the fragrance in waves, mingling with the cool hush of twilight. And you think, maybe this isn't about indulgence after all. Maybe it's about shifting the senses, inviting a weary empire to creak of wooden wheels and the steady clop of hooves on stone. It's barely past dawn, and already the roads are alive with movement. Merchants unloading carts, scribes hurrying to offices, bakers tossing open their shutters with clouds of flour blooming around them. But something catches your eye. The carts themselves. No longer the dull, utilitarian wagons you're used to. These are bedazzled. One rumbles past, painted in soft teal, its canopy trimmed with tassels. Another has silk curtains drawn across its sides like a portable theater. A third features embroidered seat cushions and what appear to be ostrich feathers. You ask around and learn this latest trend has come straight from the imperial household. Elagabalus, never one to travel incognito, has begun parading around Rome in carts so plush they resemble moving bedrooms. Inspired citizens, especially the wealthy and the eccentric, have followed suit. Practicality is losing the race to softness. Historians still argue whether this was an imperial stunt to distract from political unrest or an authentic gesture of comfort in an increasingly chaotic world. You catch a glimpse of one of the imperial carriages as it rounds a corner. Draped in gold-threaded linen and drawn by white horses whose manes have been delicately perfumed, it glides more than rolls, as if floating on a cloud of scented air. The emperor waves lazily from behind translucent veils. Is that a harpist playing inside? Back in the common quarters, reactions are mixed. A stonemason shakes his head. You can't pave roads with silk. A laundress, giggling, says she's sewing lace into her laundry basket, just in case the emperor stops by. There's even a rumor that one senator, ever the traditionalist, ordered his cart painted to resemble old legionary armor, brass rivets and all, just to protest what he called the slow unraveling of Roman dignity. His cart was reportedly upended by a low-hanging garland near the Temple of Juno. Despite the snickers, there's no denying the trend is catching on. Carts now double as fashion statements, as extensions of one's public identity. You see a lawyer riding in a cart shaped like a scroll. A midwife's is stitched with tiny fabric swaddles. Even some goats, used to pull smaller carts in the alleys, sport miniature silken capes. You board a modest cart yourself for a ride to the baths. Your driver offers a cushion and a spritz of bergamot water for the ride. The journey feels oddly serene, the normal jostling softened by layers of padding. As the city slides past in tones of marble and fabric, you consider how the mundane has been transformed. Even transportation, once a dusty affair, now moves to the rhythm of comfort. At the bathhouse, talk centers around whether public carts will soon be regulated for softness. Someone jokes that Rome is on its way to becoming a giant lounge. Another predicts a silk tax. No one seems too bothered. The water is warm, the steam sweet with infused herbs. As you lean back, muscles relaxing beneath the mineral-rich heat, you realize how thoroughly softness has woven its way into Roman life. You close your eyes for a moment, and for a brief second, imagine the whole empire, armored in linen, perfumed by roses. The following week brings an unexpected decree. Not a ban, not a scented mandate, but something far more theatrical. Elagabalus, in what can only be described as a performance art policy, announces the founding of the Society of Soothing Sounds, a hand-picked circle of musicians, poets, and soft-spoken philosophers whose task is to gently re-enchant Roman life through controlled background noise. That's right, background noise. You find yourself at a newly converted colonnade where members of this sound society hum soft harmonies under ivy-covered arches. One man plays a lyre so delicately you're not sure he's even touching it. Another woman recites poetry in a whisper, her words almost dissolving into the air before reaching your ears. The emperor's reasoning? Life should feel like a dream you never quite wake from. You overhear a courtier explaining that every temple now has its own ambient sound team. Worshippers at the Temple of Vesta are treated to flute duets. Near the Senate, a gentle drumming mimics the heartbeat of the Republic. And in the marketplace, a rotating chorus of murmurers hired to soothe rather than shout. Historians still debate whether this decree reflected Elagabalus's personal desire for serenity, or whether it was a subtle attempt to muffle dissent through beauty. You visit the forum next, where a harpist is stationed beside the rostra, plucking notes between each speaker's sentence. Senators adjust their tones accordingly. Even outrage now must be expressed in a hushed register. You hear one sputtering man growl, "May the gods strike me down," but quietly, mind you. At first, many scoff, but soon the city begins to soften in tone. Tavern owners hire singers who only perform lullabies. Couriers recite messages like bedtime stories. Even gladiator matches are briefly experimented with dreamy flute accompaniment, though that one doesn't stick. In one garden courtyard, you spot an elderly couple sipping wine while a young boy softly sings the Aeneid in falsetto. "He sings us through supper," the woman says fondly. "We sleep better afterward." It's not just Rome that changes. People change. Arguments become debates. Yells become sighs. The city begins to hum, quite literally, with a background music of its own invention. Even you find your thoughts slowing to match the tempo. When you visit the baths of Caracalla, a newly installed water harp has been set at the entrance. Each drop that falls into the pool triggers a note. Bathers close their eyes and float, wrapped in warm water and quiet sound. By twilight, you pass a schoolroom where students are being read to sleep with myths of Jupiter and Mars, not by a parent, but by a priest trained in ritual vocal softness. A boy sleep mumbles something about Minerva wearing slippers. Of course, there's backlash. A retired general loudly declares he'll never trade marching orders for murmured suggestions. He starts a brief campaign called Bring Back the Bark, which mostly involves standing in the forum and yelling until his voice cracks. Still, the movement holds. You fall asleep that night in a friend's atrium, lulled by a reed flute being played on the roof by a teenager paid in grapes and compliments. And as you drift off, it occurs to you, Rome has always been noisy, full of clash and cry. But under Elagabalus, it's found a new rhythm, a hush,
By
a
now,
murmur. You've grown used to the
softer
surreal
influence.
symphony of Rome under Elagabalus, perfumed senators, embroidered dinners, and background harpists tuned to temple acoustics. But just when you think you've seen every soft, scented curve of imperial whimsy, a new proclamation rustles through the city. All public statues are to be modestly reclothed. Yes, statues, marble, cloaked. The decree insists this move is in honor of modesty, fabric craftsmanship, and the divine chill of morning stone. So, from the forum to the fountains, Rome's naked gods and bare-bicepped emperors begin receiving togas, tunics, and scarves, hand-tailored for cold stone torsos. You watch a team of imperial seamstresses scaling the statue of Mars Ultor, wrapping his exposed chest in embroidered wool. One of them sighs. He still looks angry, but now he's warm. Historians still argue whether this bizarre campaign reflected Elagabalus's aesthetic vision, his discomfort with the old martial nakedness of Rome, or simply a fascination with mixing softness into the hardest surfaces imaginable. Not everyone is pleased, of course. A sculptor in the Campus Martius groans. I chiseled that calf muscle for 6 weeks. Now it's covered in lace. Others embrace it with creative flair. Venus statues get silk veils. Minerva receives armor made entirely from brocade. A heroic bust of Julius Caesar now wears a velvet cowl so large it looks like he's auditioning for a winter festival. You hear stories of a group of tailors becoming minor celebrities, drapery artists for divine and dead clients. One even refers to himself as the official seamstress to Jupiter. On your way to the baths, you pass a particularly striking scene, the equestrian statue of Domitian, long since recontextualized, now draped in a flowing cloak dyed imperial purple, flapping majestically in the breeze. Birds nest in its folds. Even ordinary citizens begin dressing up household statuary. You're invited to a dinner where the host's Lares, tiny guardian gods, sit clothed in hand-stitched doll garments. They've never looked more dignified, the host beams, offering you a fig soaked in honey and rosewater. Children start dressing up their clay play figures. Some go further, writing little dramas and parading their modest marble heroes around town. A popular play emerges in the marketplace. Apollo's Closet, in which the god debates whether silk or linen best suits solar deities. The temples adjust too. Priests add garment offering rituals to daily rites. You even spot a group of worshippers gently undressing and redressing a statue of Fortuna, treating her like a divine fashion doll, complete with tiny shoes. You can't help but smile as the absurdity warms into charm. There's a curious piece to it all. Rome, so long defined by hard power, stone, steel, war, is now swaddled in layers of linen and theatrical modesty. Even the gods, once bare-chested in eternal perfection, are offered warmth. And you? You start to notice you're slower now, softer around the edges. Maybe it's the scented air, the background flutes, or the way even statues seem a little less stern in a cloak. But Rome feels less like a colossus tonight, and more like a very large, very strange theater that's decided for once to think Rome can't get any sleepier when a whisper floats down from the Palatine Hill. Elagabalus is planning the Festival of Gentle Triumphs. Triumphs, of course, were once roaring spectacles, parades of conquest, trumpets blaring, prisoners marched through the streets, generals basking in the glory of blood and expansion. But not under Elagabalus. His Festival of Gentle Triumphs promises no captives, no shouting crowds, and no elephants. Instead, it's a procession of victories in comfort, and you've been invited to witness it firsthand. You stake out a spot near the Temple of Castor and Pollux. The usual trappings of triumph are gone. In their place, padded chariots, flower petals dropped by handmaidens, and heralds singing the names of soft achievements. Lucius, who invented goose feather sandals. Claudia, mistress of quiet teas. The crowd hums rather than cheers. Children wave silken ribbons. You overhear one older man muttering, "In my day, we cheered for war. Now we're clapping for cushions." Historians still argue whether this festival was an intentional parody of military triumphs or a genuine reimagining, an attempt to elevate the domestic, the peaceful, the small comforts that often go unnoticed. The parade continues. A baker rides by, crowned in olive leaves for developing a crustless barley loaf praised for not waking sleepers. Next comes a group of washerwomen honored for perfecting linen that whispers against the skin. They ride in silence, smiling faintly, holding out sachets of lavender to the crowd. At one point, a scholar is wheeled past on a platform covered in scrolls. He's credited with the invention of a bedtime alphabet for children, letters shaped like tiny sleeping animals. He waves once, then falls asleep mid-procession. The crowd murmurs in admiration. You catch a glimpse of Elagabalus himself, reclining in a shell-shaped litter draped in moon-colored silk. He doesn't wave, but a golden fan moves gently beside him, operated by a eunuch in socks made of spun violets. And then the highlight, a giant golden goose on wheels, surrounded by musicians playing lullabies on panpipes. The goose is apparently symbolic of the victory of naps over conflict, or possibly just Elagabalus's favorite animal. Historians are still confused. The city's mood is lifted, oddly enough. There's no roaring triumph, no bloodied spoils, but there's pride in goose feather bedding, in silence, in softness. Rome, once the queen of thunder, has become the empress of hush. Later at a tavern, someone raises a toast to our gentle conquests. A few patrons snore gently into their goblets. One man offers to wrestle, but promises to do it quietly, in socks on a mattress. As you walk home under the low purple sky, you pass doorways lit by oil lamps, their flames barely flickering. You hear the soft creak of clean sheets, the murmur of families settling in, and somewhere, the lingering echo of lullaby panpipes drifting over the rooftops. Rome, for now, has declared peace, not with barbarians, fabric, but yes, with fabric, rustling in the streets. Not riots, not marching feet, not even the melodic thrum of lyres, just cloth being unfurled. Turns out Elagabalus has done it again. He's declared a citywide pajama mandate. Well, technically, it's the Unified Attire for Civic Serenity Act, but everyone's calling it the Pajama Law. Starting today, Roman citizens are encouraged strongly to wear sleepwear in public for the sake of harmony, emotional vulnerability, and daily readiness for naps. The emperor has personally commissioned a line of public-approved robes, lightweight, lavender-scented, and dyed in pastel shades with names like Evening Fog and First Yawn. You emerge into a forum that now looks more like a sleepover. Senators drift past in embroidered, lounging tunics. A centurion barks orders in a powder blue wrap festooned with embroidered moons. Market vendors peddle grapes and goat cheese in slippered feet. Historians still argue whether this bizarre fashion decree was an attempt to undermine the stiff old hierarchy or just the next step in Elagabalus's long, sleepy unraveling of Roman norms. A few rebel. One shopkeeper refuses to sell anything to customers in bedclothes. He's promptly arrested by a Praetorian guard dressed in a footed onesie with tiny stitched laurels on the chest. The empire, it seems, is not above enforcing relaxation. You visit the Temple of Jupiter, where the priest now leads chants in a sky-colored robe lined with fleece. The statue of Jupiter, once fearsome, has also been modified. He now wears a custom toga patterned with twinkling stars. At his feet, a plush cushion and a basket of sleep herbs. Everywhere you go, the mood has changed. Arguments become pillow talks. Traders negotiate over nap-friendly textiles. One couple even gets engaged in matching sleep tunics, whispering vows like bedtime stories. You hear of new occupations forming overnight. Dream weavers who design personal sleep aura wardrobes. Yawn bards who recite calming narratives while you shop. And nap marshals, roving civic officials who gently guide overstimulated citizens to designated rest zones. You try one yourself. A low marble bench tucked into a shaded portico where a soft-spoken official offers you a warm compress, a fig, and a tale about the domestication of geese. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake up 20 minutes later, refreshed and faintly smiling. Even the imperial court holds a pajama assembly. Elagabalus arrives in a glowing white wrap with sleeves that trail like morning fog. Instead of debating laws, the senators pass a resolution mandating afternoon quiet hours. One senator proposes a dream-sharing symposium, and several fall asleep during the vote. You can't help but admire the strange effectiveness of it all. Without lifting a sword, without a single campaign, Elagabalus has managed what few emperors ever could, a pacified Rome. Not through force, but through softness. You pass a graffiti wall near the baths. Someone has etched a line in charcoal. We used to fight for glory. Now we lounge for peace. And honestly, you're fine with that. By now, you've stopped questioning it. The rules of the old Rome, sharp togas, marble hardness, endless public noise, have faded like the last clatter of sandals at dusk. The city exhales. And you're walking slowly along the Tiber, wrapped in a robe the color of watered milk, watching the moon stretch its light across the rooftops. Tonight marks the culmination of Elagabalus's month of stillness, a final flourish in his operatic devotion to tranquility. The emperor has declared that for this one night, Rome must hold its breath. No commerce, no formal rituals, no performances, just stillness, quiet, and reflection under the stars. Even the river seems to understand. The Tiber glides past with barely a ripple, and the usual songs of boatmen have been replaced by soft humming and the occasional gentle splash of water lapping at the banks. Atop the Palatine Hill, the palace glows, not from torches or bonfires, but from hundreds of tiny oil lamps arranged in constellations across the floor. The emperor himself is said to be inside, reclining in a chamber of silk-canopied silence, attended by a circle of eunuchs trained in whisper-only communication. There's something undeniably dreamlike about it. You pass the forum, empty except for a few guards in soft gray tunics, pacing slowly, sandals muffled with wool wrappings. The great bronze doors of temples are left ajar, incense curling out in slow tendrils. You peek into one and find a priest meditating with his forehead resting on a folded towel embroidered with clouds. Historians still debate whether this stillness marked Elagabalus's last grasp at spiritual legitimacy or simply his most audacious bedtime experiment. Some later writers mocked it as madness. Others envied the calm it brought, if only for one evening. You wander toward a public courtyard. Citizens lie on cushions in quiet clusters, murmuring memories or reading soft-spoken poetry. A boy shares warm goat's milk with his sister. An old man sketches the moon in dust. No one speaks above a hush. Suddenly, a small procession glides through the streets. No instruments, just footsteps, Elagabalus's final symbolic walk through the capital. He wears a robe stitched with silver threads and holds a pillow, not a scepter. His face is peaceful, maybe even a little tired. He does not wave. He doesn't need to. People bow their heads. Some smile. One girl whispers, "Sleep well, strange emperor." As he disappears into the palace gates, you feel it too. That tug of rest, of stories told and dreams invited. And so, at last, your feet carry you home. Inside, the walls glow with lamplight. You slip into bed, your head sinking into a goose feather pillow probably invented by one of the gentle triumph heroes. Outside, Rome slumbers,